was to intelligently read and intelligently compose in a lot of different ways, or provide answers, intelligently compose answers. So the big issue for most professors nowadays that are in education is, oh my God, writing education is toast, because the students will simply put the writing prompt or whatever into AI, and then I'll be grading a computer generated paper. Okay. Now, that is not necessarily the case. It depends upon how you handle it. And so I'm going to tell you a tale of two ways of handling it. One is open-ended writing prompts. If you put open-ended writing prompts, and by that I mean you have like a topic, or you have perhaps an analytical question that you're asking, and you tell the kids, I want 2,000 words, and I want there to be 2 primary sources and 4 secondary sources, or 5 secondary sources, something like that. Now, before AI, what you would get is either the student would cheat, or they would crib Wikipedia, or they do something like that, or they would attempt to do it themselves. And most often, not always, some students can write, they would give you a writing a paper that doesn't even have a real argument in it, sort of descriptive. It is not thesis driven. It is not evidence driven. Okay. And it would also have a paper that the student had very poor literary diction, didn't have a very good vocabulary. This is called language literacy. And the reason why you had this, reading specialists already know exactly why this is so, is because the students haven't read enough to see the patterns of language literacy and to see the genres of argument writing. Reading specialists tell us that students, before they hit the senior year of high school, for about 6 or 7 years, need to read 1 to 2 million words a year. That's 6 to 12 books a year in order to develop college-ready language literacy and genre-specific writing, okay? So most of our students don't do that. We already know they don't read a lot, and that's the reason why they write poorly. There is another way of doing this, which is to use closed-ended writing prompts, which I'm going to show you in a minute. But the open-ended writing prompt is going to be toast, because all that a student has to do is go into your syllabus, copy and paste your instructions, even detailed instructions, put them into AI, and literally within 40 seconds, and we have tested this, you will have a paper that has a pretty decent argument, and it will have very good language literacy. I'm quite impressed with the way AI writes its papers as really good literacy, okay? So anyway, there's an alternative way of doing this. There's variations on this, which is called writing process, or I would call it closed-ended writing prompts. And I'm going to show you an example of this, okay? This is a writing workshop that I developed. I use closed-ended writing prompt workshops. I was a history teacher, but I believed in history writing education. So I used this method. And so anyway, this is a Jacob Riis. For those of you who are historians, this is a person who was a photojournalist at the beginning of the 20th century. And he wrote a book, a primary source called How the Other Half Lives. Okay. And it was basically about poverty in the urban areas of America. And he was trying to convince people to essentially adopt progressive era legislation, okay, or agendas. And so you can see there's a background to this in this particular writing workshop. Then there's the sources, selected sources, like 5 or actually, I think there's 12 photos here. And the photos show the poverty that people are living, children living in poverty, etc. Now you give the students with this particular writing prompt an analytical question. In this one, it's asking, when you look at these photos, what seems to be the danger or the menace that poverty is presenting to the people that Jacob Riis was trying to reach? And then we give them what's called a scaffold. In other words, this is a graphic organizer which helps them to collect the evidence and think in terms of a concept and an evidence that would support the concept, okay? Now, when the student is done with this particular piece, they go and they submit it to the professor for grading, okay? Then they move on to write a thesis. In this one, the student's given scaffolding where they're given examples, they're giving the blueprint, they're showing visualization so that they understand that the thesis contains these dangers and menaces. And then they go on, we actually even can go as far as giving them the actual blueprint blueprinted thesis, and the students fill in. This is rather popular with my professors, for the students to fill in their concepts. And then this is submitted, okay? Then you have write the evidence, which is actually the topic sentences. And what's nice about the graphic organizer, as you can see, is it basically sets it up for them to understand that there's 4 paragraphs. Each row represents a paragraph. The topic sentence will be the danger and menace. The evidentiary sentences will follow in the paragraph. And then they submit this to their professor, and we actually write out an example. I'm in this particular one. We have an example of a complete paragraph with the topic sentence and evidence sentences. This is called modeling. It's a form of scaffolding for the students, and then they submit. And then we go on and we've broken it down to another step, which is explaining how to write an opener and how to write a closer for a conclusion paragraph for it. And in this particular case, we give the students even the opening piece. You don't have to do that, but in this particular one, it's heavily scaffolded, and the students have to write the rest of the paragraph, and then they have to put it together with the main body and submit it, okay? Now, why is this mitigating or problematic for AI? Well, first of all, it's got 4 submissions, not just one open-ended submission where the thing does all the work for you. Each step is built on the previous step. So AI can't do anything until you give it the previous step, all right, in terms of analyze the evidence and going forward. In addition, AI does not think for itself what to do with things like this. You have to give it very specific instructions. That means the students would have to go and figure out how to give it the full instructions so it does it right. And then you have a problem with the source like this, which is images, where it's difficult for AI to actually get in there and do it. We have many primary source activities and 50 writing workshops, 300 primary source activities, use all kinds of sources, but you can select, okay? And that's the way that would work. The problem for professors lies in the grading. I'm like, as many professors have told me, hey, I'm a social science teacher, I'm a history teacher, I am not an English teacher. And so having to grade these 4 parts for some people just is a bit much. We have many people who use it, but for some people, they feel that's too much. Now that takes me to where AI can be kind of a godsend, or even what I would call a game changer, okay? Because AI doesn't just compose for your students, it reads, it intelligently reads. And if it can intelligently read, that means it can grade, and therefore it can solve the problem of many grading steps, okay? Also, AI can help your students prove language literacy. So let me show you where this can work, okay? Okay, I'm sorry, I have to. Okay, so, excuse me, I'm in the wrong place, okay? So here's the situation. As I said, AI is like a big brain. It can't do anything until you tell it what to do, okay? So that means, and you also don't want to have the situation where you're putting each student, thing into AI. That's almost as much work as anything. So we don't want that. We want to be able to go into a digital grader, like our Easy Grader, and you have all the students submitting into that digital grader. You also have this on Canvas and the other LMS system. You put it into the Easy Grader, and then there have to be software hooks, which basically tell AI, okay, first I'm going to throw over to you a bunch of these thesis submissions, for example, and you're going to want to find this kind of thing in it, okay? Then you're going to want to have a rubric built in from the software hooks that tells AI how to actually give it a grade, that particular thing. Then AI can do 3 things, actually. One thing is it can first start off by saying, this student isn't even following the instructions. You can sort the students as to who's following and who's not. Then he'll send it back to the digital grader, which sends it back to the student. It says, hey, revise and resubmit this. You did not do this, 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 and this. And then that all gets done without the professor having to do anything. It eliminates the sorting step, or what I used to call the sorting step. Then it will go in and it will give numerical grades according to the rubric very consistently, and it will send this back to the Easy Grader. So when it goes back to the digital or Easy Grader, then it will be delayed and will not post yet, because it will give you the opportunity to look at the comments it's making, look at the grades it's making, peruse all of this, and decide, okay, these grades are good, push the button, boom, it goes into your grade book, okay? You can choose to check out maybe thesis not so much, but then spend more time looking at the final papers. But we estimate with this process, it will reduce grading on closed-ended subjective grading assignments down to 25% of what it would normally take. And we think that this might actually cause professors to think of using writing education more, not give up on it, but use it more. So in a way, ironically, AI might actually, improve writing education because more professors will use it, okay? It also might do a good job in those high schools where they're not teaching writing very well, help those professors teach writing better so that when they get to you, the students can write the papers a bit better. Now, here's the language literacy part. Beautifully written language literacy in AI. But what we would do, and what we are thinking to do, is that we would take the student's paper that he submitted to you after he finished the closed writing process, okay? Has his kind of simplistic grading, simplistic writing, not very good. And we would write software hooks and say, don't change the student's thesis, don't change his concepts, don't change his evidence or whatever, just polish the language in the paper. So it would go to AI, it would do this, the software hook would bring it back, and the students would see their own writing, and then they would see polished writing next door to each other. And they could then, as an option, you could ask them to write a comparison paragraph, or you could ask them to write a bulleted list so that they are noticing exactly the language literacy improvement on their own writing. I find that when you give students language literacy, you should write more like that. They go like, oh, how? I don't know how. This creates a comparison and a learning moment for students, in my opinion, that would help to improve their language literacy better. Now, understanding what AI can and cannot do. Again, artificial intelligence is just a big brain, and you need to understand what is happening with AI right now. There are over a dozen, there's probably closer to a dozen and a half companies now, and all the major big players in Silicon Valley, Google, Amazon, Facebook, Apple, NVIDIA, and then OpenAI, the first company that came out, it made it more useful to people. This is the beginning of the thing. But what it requires is deep pocket investors. You need over $1 billion to build one of these systems, okay? So what's going to happen in the future is that people like us who have small companies, we're going to focus in on one thing, okay, like writing process. And we're going to build software that goes through automated grading and language literacy. These are the two goals through writing process. And we're going to put it into artificial intelligence, okay? And we're already starting to do this. And then artificial intelligence will be able to spit out what we want, okay? And we're not going to be the only company. There are going to be tons of companies. There are companies right now working on proctoring, companies on learning analytics, on predictive analytics. There are companies that are working on AI detection. There are companies that are working on curriculum lesson planning, etc. There's companies, everyone's choosing a different thing, and they're all going in here and using AI. The companies who build AI, like Google, they don't do that kind of thing. They're waiting for other companies to come along and do it with them. So we do have, I'm going to put a little pitch out here because Globalyceum is now part of the way through automating that particular process on writing process. That's what we're looking at. That's what we want. And we want to use our workshops to develop that writing process grading initiative. So essentially, we're asking all our current professors, make sure that they use a writing workshop if they can at all fit it into their curriculum, and help us with the development of this. Because when you do software development, you don't just build it and people come. You have to kind of have a human impact on it, or human feedback on it as you're going along. So we're looking for some extra professors. I'd like 15 if I can get them, okay, who will accept a free pilot. That means free subscriptions to the students for Globalyceum spring and summer of 2024. And then we will provide you with the automated subjective grading, literally where you peruse it and you push the button. We will take care of everything up to that point. And then you can come back and give us the feedback, the critique, the advice, the suggestions, or whatever that you've experienced, and whether you like this or whether this seems promising to you. So that's what we're kind of sort of pitching this piece in here. We'd love for you to join the product.